Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Molly Rance Calhoun, President and CEO of the Ohio State University Alumni Association. The Alumni Association is proud to partner with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion on a four-part series of panel discussions pertaining to race in our country. And I am pleased to be your moderator for this first conversation. Through time and change and still today, our alumni have aspired to build a more just world. And this continues with our current dedicated students. As Buckeyes, it is our responsibility to uphold our university values and support a new generation as they march forward to achieve greater justice and equality. And we must begin in our own backyard. Diverse groups of thought leaders are and will always be drivers of social change, and universities are conveners of these important conversations. Our gathering today represents this idea and comes on the heels of the Ohio State Alumni Magazine fall issue package that addresses the topic of deep-rooted inequity. The team that puts the Alumni Magazine together knew it could provide alumni and the university a valuable service with this fall issue. And we could do that by identifying and sharing ways all of us can strive toward a goal of racial justice. We knew there was a compelling story to tell, largely because of Ohio State's willingness and an institution and individual Buckeyes to take a meaningful look at hard issues. I don't need to tell all of you that our university has copious expertise among its faculty, staff, students, and alumni. The magazine set out to tap into that expertise in a few areas that we agreed were ripe for change. That phrase grew from a concept to a headline and eventually to a title for these conversations that we are starting tonight. Among the many individuals who could have provided insight for the package, we identified about 25 people who could talk about ways American society could address racism through steps forward in particular areas: the criminal justice system, education, health, housing, economics, and the arts. The goal was to spark thinking and to give readers information and ideas to contribute to progress. Those suggestions for involvement, to join conversations like this, to support students, and to stay informed were an important part of the package. They also represent our continued pledge as a university and an alumni association to keep alumni informed, engaged, and inspired to be lifelong learners. Today's dialogue features Ohio State's president, Christina M. Johnson. Early in her tenure, President Johnson has empowered our university to live our vision and our values, and to lead us in efforts to face daunting challenges. She is joined today by two other inspiring individuals, the co-chairs of the University Task Force on Racism and Racial Inequities, Vice Provost James L. Moore III of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and Tom Gregoire, Dean of the College of Social Work. Our intent today is to have frank conversations about how the university can purposefully and deliberately set out to bend the arc of moral justice that Dr. Martin Luther King famously spoke of towards greater equality. So let's get started. President Johnson, we have already seen evidence of your strong vision for Ohio State and look forward to learning more about your plans and strategies. Could you please tell us what you mean when you talk about creating an anti-racist university? And how does that definition align with our land-grant mission? And how does that impact Ohio State as a Research One institution?
Well, thank you very much, Molly. It's a pleasure to be here, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be with my co-panelists, Drs. Moore and Gregoire, who are also co-chairing our task force on racism and racial inequities. I think for me, an anti-racist university means that it's no longer enough to not be racist. It means that we have to take active actions towards dismantling, any inequities that we see, particularly those that are racist, sexist, all the isms. So I think that's the first and foremost. It's dismantling those items. And then I think secondly, it's recognizing what around us, like some of the wonderful pieces that were in the beautiful alumni magazine talked about, like Andrea Williams talking about race is not an option. We need to have the conversations. We need to look around and understand why the conditions that have been created came about and what role racism played in those. So I think in my mind, that's what I mean by an anti-racist university.
And how will you make that happen? What are the steps that you envision Ohio State taking to become such an institution?
Right. So we've already taken a few steps. And the first one, it was really taken by my predecessor. I joined September 1, as you know, and Dr. Drake formed the task force on racism and racial inequities that are co-chaired by Drs. Moore and Gregoire. So we've been working together every Friday. We meet from 1 to 2:30, and I'm joining most of those times to come up with what, a national academy type study where you have findings, you have recommendations on how to address the findings in the state of the university, and then what are the grand challenges that are barriers to carrying out those recommendations. So in October, we're launching a whole series of group listening, surveys, conversations that's going on actually this month. And then this task force will be developing some of the recommendations that will constitute our action plan. So that's the first element that I wanted to talk about. The second element is, as you know, we launched a seed fund, $1 million seed fund, to look at some of the solutions regarding racism that we see. We received 72 proposals and we are evaluating those, and I believe they'll be awarded in December. So those are some of the concrete actions that we're taking.
Thank you, President Johnson.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry.
No, just said thank you.
Okay. Vice Provost Moore, I have heard you say, we aim to shatter myths and share realities when talking about the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Can you explain what that means to you and give us some background on the historical significance of the office?
Well, thank you, Molly. Thank you for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be in the midst with Dean Gregoire and President Johnson. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion, formerly the Office of Minority Affairs, has a storied history at this institution. We've been around 50 years, so a third of the university's existence we've been around. And we've played a tremendous role in creating a groundswell and making the institution even more inclusive and inviting for not only persons of color, but the entire university enterprise. We've been very fortunate to play a tremendous role in helping people reach their dreams and aspirations. And so when we talk about shattering myths and sharing realities, too often people, when they think about the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, they instantly begin to think everybody looks like me and everybody that our office serves are people of color. That's far from the truth. Our office impact first generation all the way to the sixth generation college students. They're Black, they're Latinx, they're Asian, they're biracial, they're Christian, they're Jewish, they're Muslim, they're atheists. Our office represent the world. And I think it's important that we recognize that we're one of the great intellectual installations in the world, and we should play a role in impacting the whole world. And in order for us to impact the whole world, it's important that we reach all communities. And that's why I'm very proud to have an experience to be able to work at Ohio State University, because we come in contact with so many people, and some don't even think their dreams and aspirations can come to pass. But the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, we built an apparatus where we connect opportunities with individuals' aspirations.
That's great. Thank you. So Dr. Moore, you are also our Chief Diversity Officer. So can you tell us how you, in that role, will support the vision and strategy of President Johnson to become an anti-racist institution?
Yes. Well, certainly we're elated that President Johnson is here You know, the Office of Diversity Inclusion is connected to the Vice Provost's role. The Chief Diversity Officer role is bigger, it's more grand. It focuses more on policies, processes, as well as connecting the dots and bringing units together where we can have greater impact. And, you know, Ohio State is a big institution. It's like a cruise ship, and asking a cruise ship to turn is very difficult. And so part of the CDO role is to help us be a little bit more agile, where we can leverage all our human, financial, as well as technological resources, where we can make the institution even a greater institution for everyone. In turn, we don't do that just to do it. We do it because we believe that education is a public good, and being a public land grant university, we should be a public good, and we should be engaged with solving complex social, technological problems that the world has been confronted with.
Thank you, Provost or Vice Provost Moore. My next question goes to Dean Gregoire. Along with Dr. Moore, you are co-chairing the task force on racism and racial inequities. What are the desired outcomes of this task force? And can you give us an update on the progress?
Happy to do that. And thank you, Molly, both for the invitation and for your leadership. So we have 15 members on our task force. So it consists of faculty, staff, and students. If I had more time, I'd tell you about all of them because they're an awesome group of people. But you can go to the website at ODI and learn more about them. Along with Dr. Moore, I co-chair, and we're coordinated by Dr. Sarah Childers from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and Jamila Goodall and Anna Brady, our graduate research assistants, who are doing a lot of heavy lifting for us. And as she noted already, President Johnson is with us all the time, which is inspiring to us as a group. And I'll probably comment on that later. Broadly, outcomes would be, and you heard some of them already, but to promote an inquiry in our university that creates a supportive, courageous, and deeply reflective anti-racist university community. We want a community that feels equally accessible and nurturing to everybody. We're going to recommend and then see implemented action steps that promote equity and build community among students, faculty, and staff, and to identify and eliminate long-held systemic practices, policies, programs, and processes that disadvantage certain groups, whether we know it or not, or perpetuate a status quo that's actually inequitable. And because we're Ohio State, we're going to be a community and a national leader in promoting anti-racism and equity in higher education. The committee's meeting weekly. We have a number of subcommittees that hold additional meetings. On many days, I see more of James than I do of my wife. So we're doing our best there. Our first goal is, as President Johnson told us, is to listen, and we have been listening. We'll be launching surveys in the next few days, and then focus groups followed by larger listening sessions. We want to hear broadly from the community, and we want to see the university through the eyes of those whose experience might be really different than many of us. We also want to hear what's working. There's a lot of good things at our university, and we need to ferret those out too, so we can reinforce it and encourage and teach each other. And then, as President Johnson shared also, she's encouraged us to identify grand challenges related to race, equity, and anti-racism. These are ideas that are transformative and could solve fundamental problems, and we're working on that now too. So we're being reflective, we're being courageous, we're being bold, and we're going as a group to do it.
Thank you. Can you also talk about what roles can and should deans and university senior leadership have in making this vision of an anti-racist university become a reality?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Leaders need to lead, and there can be no bystanders in this work. As our president has reminded us, if we're not working to change things, we're allowing them to remain as they are. And again, leaders aren't bystanders. That's what it means to be anti-racist. So you can't delegate your work. And if this applies to all those who are watching, alumni and others who are leaders in some other context, you can't delegate the work of diversity to a diversity committee or to this task force. You know, we could disagree on the path and the priorities, but there's way too much empirical evidence to not conclude that the status quo in society is harmful to many people, in many ways. So to that end, all Ohio State leaders, all leaders out there need to be immersed in their own reflection. This work starts at home, not looking out, it's looking in first and listening, learning. And I think the other point I'd make about that, ultimately, all organizations go in the direction of their leaders' gaze. We're here tonight because of the direction that our president's setting for us. So all of us as leaders need to turn our gaze to considering how our own practices and policies and structures promote or don't promote equity and justice. The work calls for creativity and courage among our leaders. It can't be sufficient anymore to say, we gave it a good try, we tried really hard, or to come up with a good rationale about why we can't do it. People here worked really hard, but trying harder is not a plan. This dialogue needs to focus on new approaches, new behavior, taking risks, and supporting and collaborating with each other. And I'll close with this. My dean colleagues and other leaders at this university are up to this work. There's a strong commitment among our leadership to making fundamental change. It's dominating our conversations. We want to make a different Ohio State. I'm really proud to work for this president and this provost, and with the dean colleagues and people like James, who I deeply respect. There's a really high value in making a difference, even when we're not always sure yet how to set that course.
Thank you, Dean Gregoire. President Johnson, let's turn back to you. Can you talk a bit about representation and what that means to you? Do you have plans to increase representation within our faculty and administration?
Well, thank you very much. And by the way, you can see why the Ohio State University is such a special place after hearing from Drs. Moore and Dean Gregoire in your leadership too, Molly. So to me, representation means that clearly we reflect our demographics at a minimum. And every institution I've had the honor and pleasure of serving, I recognize that that this is not always the case. Particularly in my field, I was an engineer by training. It wasn't until my last job that I wasn't the first woman at whatever I did. I was the first woman hired as a faculty member in my department, which was a large department in Colorado. I was the first dean of engineering at Duke, was the first provost that was a woman at Hopkins, undersecretary. So it's, and this is a position now that I'm not the first, and that feels really good. So how do we get that representation? And I think this is what Dean Gregoire and Dr. Moore were talking about when the task force is looking for things that can be done now. And I want to give a shout out to the Wexner Medical Center and their task force as well on anti-racism, because they have a 21-day anti-racist challenge, which I think is great, where every day you do one thing that creates and contributes to a more equitable society. Fabulous. So I've recognized that we need to make sure that we reflect our demographics, as I said, at a minimum. So when I was at Duke, we put in place a program to really go out and recruit outstanding faculty, including women and minorities, and we're successful in tripling the number of women on faculty. And that didn't go from 1 to 3. So that was one area. When I was at Hopkins, I launched the Mosaic Initiative, which was targeted again at hiring outstanding faculty, including underrepresented minorities. And in 1 year, we had a dozen new African-American faculty in the medical center. And then at SUNY, probably the most aggressive program to date, which was called Prodigy. It's being led by Dr. Terry Miller, who is the Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Buffalo and came to SUNY Central. So this is promoting recruitment opportunity for inclusive, diverse growth. And I say it all different ways, but I think Prodigy is such a great acronym, but the biggest part of that is inclusive growth. We know from example, 2015, the Harvard Business Review study that showed that diverse teams make better and faster decisions as compared to individuals by 87%. We know that the McKinsey study that was done prior to the Harvard Business Review also talked about how decisions were just, if you looked at diverse teams where the diversity was in the upper quartile, and this was over 200 corporations, that the, actually it's 360, I have the numbers here, 366 public corporations found that when their management teams were in the upper quartile of ethnic and racial diversity, that they're 35% more likely to have financial returns above the mean. 35% more likely to have financial returns above the mean. So we know that diverse teams work, and it's because you see things that are different from each other, which is so important. But what Prodigy is looking at is hiring 1,000 underrepresented minorities and women in STEM over a decade. And so when I think about some of the art of the possible here at The Ohio State University, we have challenged the task force, and they're well up to it, fabulous individuals that are on the task force, to think really big and really bold and see what it would take to move the needle. So what do I mean by move the needle? So for example, African Americans in the state of Ohio are 14.3% of the population. Our student body here is roughly 6.1% African American. Our faculty is about 4%. So we've got a lot of great work to do in order to come up to the representation that I know we can achieve that will make us a stronger university and a better institution.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And how will we be evaluated or held accountable for success or failure in increasing representation?
Well, I think one of the things that we talked about in the task force, so not to steal your thunder, Tom and James, but one of the things we found in the COVID-19 response is that we have a dashboard. And the dashboard, you can toggle 6 different possibilities from all individuals on campus, off campus, on campus, faculty, student, staff. And when you see the numbers and you track them over time, it gives you an idea of your success. And it encourages others to also want to be on the success team. So I think that's one thing that we could think about is how we plot our success in becoming more diverse in a dashboard. I think that's one area. And I think it's setting both qualitative and quantitative goals and objectives. I mean, one of the things about Prodigy that I think makes a lot of sense is it's really looking at a culture change in how we do searches and to do more of a cohort model of a search as opposed to one-offs in one particular department. So I think those are some of the ways that we can hold ourselves accountable.
That's great. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite all 3 of our panelists to reflect on 2 things. First, what do you need to advance greater diversity, equity, and inclusion at Ohio State? And second, what role can alumni, faculty, staff, and students play in this? So Dr. Moore, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, as we all know that the institution is more than bricks and mortar. The hallmark of the institution is its alumni, and the alumni are the ones who make the institution more attractive to others because people get to see the outcomes of what a Buckeye can achieve in their respective fields. And so one of the things that I would say that is very important is collaboration with diversity and inclusion. It starts and ends with collaboration. If we want to produce a groundswell, it's very important that we work together. And it's going to require all constituents, faculty, staff, students, postdocs, administrators, alumni, and our community partners to work together so we can create the groundswell. Many of the challenges that we have in higher education, we often see in various other sectors, but we're stronger when we work together. We live in a global society and knowledge is very important. And so how do we make our institution an incubator for first talent and second for diversity? I think we're capable of doing that, but we're going to need all these different constituency groups to play their role. And we need to work together to create the groundswell that I know that we can produce.
Thank you. And Dean Gregoire, what about you? What do you need to advance the greater diversity, equity, and inclusion at Ohio State? And what role can the alumni, faculty, staff, and students play?
I think James covered it rather well. We need to build the community, and part of that's an investment. We need to be able to support more students with scholarships. The disadvantage that low-income students and underrepresented minorities experience didn't start here. It started at birth. So there's a lot we have to repair and support them on the way in. So people with capacity to invest in scholarships, we're working on, we want to become a world-class institution for the study of race and the study of anti-racism and oppression. That takes investment in faculty and investment in research projects. The university's making it, people that can do that. But it also can be, just be willing to explore, listen to other people, tell your story, listen to people tell their story, read a book, watch a documentary, be a mentor, find somebody you trust and ask a question that scares you. We all have to go to kind of the scary places about this if we're going to learn, and then we find out everybody's there with us, and I think it's okay. Help us recruit, be a mentor in your community. Sometimes we forget that the success starts after they leave us, when people launch careers. So be somebody that I can send a student back to and help them find their way into the community and support them and learn for them. So I think all of those, just be willing is a great place to start. You'll find your way.
Thank you, Dean Gregoire. And President Johnson, any additional comments and suggestions?
I'd like to build on what both Dean Gregoire and Dr. Moore said. It's interesting, just today, there was an article in Inside Higher Education that Dr. Moore sent to me. And it summarizes that our students that come to the Ohio State University that are not part of the majority, often they have not had the same kind of opportunities that other students have had. And so one of the things that we want to do, and we can do, we know it works, is to provide the so-called wraparound services and support for these students. So these are things like both Dr. Moore and Dean Gregoire mentioned, they're internships. We have 500. One of the really exciting things about the Ohio State University is we've got almost 600,000 alums. And so when you think about it, we only have 50,000 undergraduate students and 15,000 graduate students. So we've almost got 10 alums per student. The opportunity to provide that mentorship, and I think this is where we can place some investments as a university to organize this. We have wonderful mentorship programs. We have programs that will actually go back, and this is what the article said in Inside Higher Education. We need to own our local schools. We need to go back, and we're doing that across the entire state, all 88 counties. So we have the Young Scholars Program, which reaches back and starts that mentoring when the students are still in junior high or high school. And of course, Dr. Moore knows a lot more about it, can talk about it. Becoming a Buckeye. We have the Laser Program. We have a lot of these individual programs that can mentor. I think that one of the things, and is a recommendation that I'm sure will come out of the task force, is that how do we better coordinate and then leverage and elevate the programs together by putting in place an organization structure that allows us to do that, so that as an alum, that if you support this program, that support is going directly to change a life. That happens. We're doing it now. We've seen that. And now we just have to take it to scale. That's the exciting thing of the Ohio State University. You have a program that it works, and you've got the wherewithal with the alumni to take it to scale. We have to do it, and we have to do it in this area, in my opinion.
Thank you. And I would agree. It's very exciting to hear how we can have impact and how we can make a difference in all of this. And I know our Buckeyes are ready to learn more and discover other ways to pay forward and improve our communities. So let's take a few questions from our audience. So the university is considered a predominantly white institution nationally, and its student population reflects that. How is Ohio State working to increase the number of Black, Latinx, and Native American Indigenous students attending Ohio State? And that is undergraduate, graduate, and professional. Dr. Moore, I know you're familiar with a lot of the programs, as Dr. Johnson had referenced. Would you like to talk a little bit about what we're currently doing?
Sure. As I indicated, I want the audience to realize that certainly we focus tremendously on underrepresented student populations, but but our office literally impacts everyone. So I just wanted to underscore that. Uh, One of our world-class programs, and there are a number, but I don't only have a finite amount of time to talk, is our Moral Scholarship Program, arguably the largest, most comprehensive diversity scholarship program in the country. We have nearly 1,500 students. The 4-year, the 5-year, the 6-year graduation rates higher than the university average. I think this program is indicative that when you talk about diversity and inclusion, we're not lowering the bar, we're raising the bar. And I think in our storied history, we've had only 8 Rhodes Scholars across the university. 2 of the last 3 come through this program. So I want 50% of the students made the Dean's List last year. And so when you put our underrepresented groups together, we're bigger than most minority serving institutions as well as HBCUs. So our reach is unparalleled, and our scope, we can even do more. We also have the Young Scholars Program that President Johnson mentioned. It was founded in 1988. It's in 9 cities across the state of Ohio, and we work with students as early as in the 8th grade, and we nurture them because we know that all zip codes weren't created equally. We know that there are great minds in every zip code, but opportunities are not always widely dispersed in certain communities. And so we've watched over 1,000 first generation, low income students from our inner cities across the state of Ohio receive their degrees at Ohio State University. And that's something that is quite transformative, and it connects to the very foundation, what it means to be a land grant university. Well, something else what people would know, one particular group that is perennially at the bottom, it doesn't matter what state you go to, we oftentimes see African American males represent the doom and gloom of educational progress. We're very proud to say that nearly 50% of our African American males on this campus have a cumulative 3.0 GPA or higher. I would argue it's probably not a university in the United States with those kind of numbers. I'm not going to count the institutions where the N is very small. That's something that we're very proud of, and to be quite frank with you, that's what excites me to work at Ohio State. And I will also like to share that Secretary of HUD, Ben Carson, came 4 years ago, and he was exposed to our Access Collaborative program. And it's a program where individuals, college students who matriculate at the institution at the undergraduate level with children or have children along the way, there's no reason why they can't complete their education, because we have this program that provides wraparound services, and we have a partnership with Columbus Properties where we have staff on site. We have an 80% graduation rate of these individuals who came in or had children. This program should be scaled and has even greater impact. And last but not least, I would like to talk about the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, which is one of the little darlings of the National Science Foundation. And we were very fortunate to receive 4.5 million. And we're part of a consortium because at Ohio State, not that there aren't other great institutions in the state, but Ohio State has always put forth leadership or provided leadership in the state. And so there are 9 other institutions. And the whole goal of that project is to increase or broadening participation among underrepresented groups. So those are some of the many programs, but we have many more. We have Upward Bound. We have initiatives for Latinx communities, as well as many other special populations.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Anything additional from President Johnson or Dr. Gregoire?
Well, I'll jump in if that's all right. I said a little bit ago that trying harder is not a plan, and it's not. And when you listen to Dr. Moore, talk about all the initiatives they have. That's how we're going to be successful. On a small scale, I just want to shout out to a staff member of ours, Brianna Stigger, who recruits nationally in an effort to increase the diversity of our student population. That's an example of not just trying harder, but having a new plan. We're establishing really close relationships with a number of historically Black colleges and universities that have led to significantly increasing our diversity. I'll say about that too, that in diversity, there is no finish line. So we're just going to keep doing the work. We're also growing our ability to mentor and support students in the university and in our college. And it also requires a commitment to recruiting a more diverse faculty and staff. So the students go to a university that looks more like them, and providing them equitable pay, the support and the mentorship they need to succeed. So it's got to be comprehensive in that way. And there are a lot of examples in our university, including in the College of Social Work, of learning new ways to recruit, so that you do create more diverse pools and more talented pools. And we've had good luck with that once we tried new things.
Great, thank you.
If I could just add something, because I think that was just very well said. I was on a call this morning with 6 Latinx leaders on campus, and they were talking about many of the programs, Dr. Moore, that you mentioned. And one was had been in the Young Scholars Program and was in I guess in a city where he was at a high school that had it, but had a friend that was at another high school that didn't have it, or maybe it was the other way around. Anyway, they had to really fight to become part of it. And so having our ability to expand that program, I think would really make a difference, is what he was saying. And then many of the students, one was a graduate student, maybe 1 or 2 were graduate students, other were undergraduate students, is again, having faculty that look like them in the classroom. I mean, to be able to have a faculty member that, and they talked a little bit about too, if you can imagine, and it reminded me of this article inside Higher Ed, is, and I remember when I was an engineering student, when I had only men faculty members. And so if you already feel like, well, I wonder if I belong, I don't belong, and then you have to go to, office hours, they're always not someone that looks like you, you start to question a little bit. So I could really relate to what they were saying to me, which is why I'm even more passionate about what Dr. Gregoire just said, the comprehensive nature of the work that we have to do.
Great, thank you. So here's one I would love to hear, a question from our audience that I would love to hear from each one of you. Has there ever been a time you were afraid to take on a conversation about race? And if so, how did you overcome it? Who would like to start?
I'll go. Yeah, this topic is fraught with fear and anger, and maybe more now than others. For myself, this is not a space where I often go alone. I go with my community. I have people that share my values and will teach me. I think in my role as a leader, the greatest source of fear sometimes is feeling this burden of expertise, like I should have an answer. I really love the people that I work with, and I love our students. And when they're in pain and I don't know what to do, it's hard. But some of the best conversations we've ever had here on race were started with, how are you doing and how can I help? So I think it's connecting to the community and connecting to my values. That has to be really important. And I doubt she's listening, but I'll shout out to my wife, Carol Ann, because we go on all these journeys together and support each other. So don't go alone, go with people. Don't go with the burden of expertise, just go with an open heart.
Great, thank you.
I'm a son of the South. That's what we would say back home. I'm from South Carolina, and race is very salient in your life, even when you don't want it to be salient. Certainly, my family lives in my heart and my dreams and my aspirations. And so, you know, I can just say in my own career, I don't really talk about it much. I guess I'm finding my voice to talk about it. I do it in my research rather than usually talking about it, or in my work and my actions, is that much of my journey has been alone. When you enter the professoriate, it's not many people, and you always speak on behalf of the group. You always take on extra for representation. And rather than fighting it and complaining about it, and I'm not saying people don't have a right to, I've embraced it, and it's been quite transformative for me. Naturally, as a former teacher and counselor, uh, as if my grandfather was living, he's James Moore Sr., we refer to him affectionately as the Black Aristotle. And he used to say some of the best teachers don't have to say a word. They teach you in their actions and how they interact with people. And so when it's all said and done, I want people to know that I am inclusive. Hopefully they'll see that I walk the walk. Anything that I hold someone to the fire to, or to the bronze stone, that they see that my actions are aligned. And so, um, so it's ongoing. And even as the chief diversity officer, I wish that some of my staff wouldn't have to receive some of the ugly messages sometimes. I wish I could be the only one that have to take it, because we have some really decent people in our office who care deeply, and when they get a nasty message, or um, it really affects them. And so I'm a counselor by training, so I tend to internalize what people experience. And not that I'm immortal, but I am a son of the South, and some things, it's not many things I haven't seen or experienced, but the healing is in the pain. And so I do this work because it's transformative for me, and it gives me a sense of purpose.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
You know, I really like what both Dr. Moore and Dean Gregoire said. Two things I just would highlight. One is, you know, how are you doing and how can I help? Really powerful. And then also what you said, Dr. Moore, which is one of the things that gives me comfort in having tough conversations is that that's really the way we grow. These are uncomfortable conversations. If we don't have them, we're never going to grow and become stronger and better and closer together. And so I think that I also liked what you said, Dr. Moore. I also have a team that gets messages every now and again. And, I feel the same way you do. I feel like, okay, we're doing the good work, just hang in there. And you wish you could take all those arrows for them because, but I think that's right. These are uncomfortable, and that uncomfortability, that pain is the only way to grow. And we used to have a saying when I was an athlete, no pain, no gain. I didn't realize till tonight that it was probably talking about something bigger than just when I was out on the field hockey field. So
Thank you. Another question from our audience. How can we ensure the safety and security of our diverse students as we near the election with free speech being upheld?
I think that's on the mind of a lot of students. And for many of us, we just take it for granted. I just take it for granted. We're doing a lot of things around promoting voting and participation. And I think that's really important. And we're connecting and communicating with the students quite a bit around what their needs are, what their concerns are. We got a really thoughtful email in social work from a student last night around particular needs. We're going to speak to our instructors about encouraging students to vote, providing time for them to vote if they know that. We have connected to resources in the city to take people to the polls. And I think some of it is just to acknowledge the challenge and the concern that people do have. This is going to be an unusual election, perhaps. We may not get a result for a while. So we're speaking to people about that. But a lot of it is just the building of the community. Just a real fast story. When the travel ban was mentioned a few years ago, that was really frightening to a lot of our students. And I came in here about 7:30 in the morning, and there were 13 people in the hallway outside my office, and I didn't know but a few of them. Some of them were social work students, some of them weren't, but they came here because they thought they might feel safe. Our university has an obligation to let people know that this is a safe space, and we'll do what we can to protect you and support you.
Thank you.
I'll be succinct, and we've been very engaged in connecting to our university motto, education for citizenship. This is a great teachable opportunity for all of us. Our democracy will flourish is because when we engage it, and we engage in civil dialogue and discourse. And that's one of the great things about getting a college education, where you learn to cross borders and to interact with individuals with different perspectives. Freedom of speech is a civil rights tool. It's been utilized for generations. And so what we're going to be, we're trying to build an apparatus where, regardless of what side of the aisle you embrace, is that we can have a deep civility and engagement. But I think find that common line, and that common line is that we care about our country and we want it to be strong. And so how do we do that? We do it by learning how to engage in discourse and exchange, hearing different perspectives. And so if you go to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion website, we have lots of resources available for our university community and those who want to participate in discourse and exchange. And they may say, well, what should I do? We have lots of resources available to those individuals.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that. We do provide a lot of resources for our students. And I think it's also, we can be hopeful that no matter what happens in a few weeks' time, that by continuing to talk about some of our great leaders, many of whom we lost in 2020, whether it was John Lewis or Ruth Bader Ginsburg or others who really engaged with individuals that they didn't share the same values, but found a way to build a bond and a friendship. I wrote about it in the letter really to the community when it was announced that Justice Ginsburg had passed, because I had the honor and the pleasure of getting to know her, and that much has been said about her legendary friendship with another justice who couldn't be further from her in terms of his conservative views and her more liberal views, and yet they were very dear friends. And I think that's what we need to get back to. I think it comes back to the question you asked before, which is how do we engage in conversations that make us uncomfortable, but it's so important.
Thank you. I think we might have time for one more question. So many working class white people are being crushed by our socioeconomic system and don't feel privileged. How do we address this?
I think that's a great question. And poverty has impacts anyone who's experienced it. And what we've done as an institution, that's why I said our office reflect the world. And we have those students who come from Appalachia, or they come from humble beginnings. And, in fact, I have a student who came from humble beginnings, who's white, who's at the University of Cambridge, and arguably the top 5 university in the world. And our office played a critical role, because we know great minds come from every zip code, and we can no longer afford in our society to leave individuals at bay or not giving them access to opportunities. And that's what we do at Ohio State. We need to continuously reach out to working poor, working class families broadly. And one of the things that this institution, long before Ivy Leagues and all these elite institutions start talking about access and affordability, Ohio State has been leading the charge in that area. And so you can come to our office, as I said, and you might see more students who don't look like me. And you might say, is that the Office of Diversity and Inclusion? That's really where we are right now. We're trying to connect opportunities with individuals' aspirations. And we believe that when we bring students from all walks of life together, and what they share is that they have this dream and or aspiration that they can achieve anything, and around it, it's infectious to be around them because we've created an apparatus where they can grow and they can develop and they can learn about things and talk about things that is totally foreign from where they grew up. And we just thank their families for doing all what they could for them. And they bring them here. And hopefully when they come back for graduation, their families feel good that we gave them a better child that can contribute to the world.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, if you look at our time and change strategic plan, two of the pillars are access and affordability. And we have really, over the last 5 years, and my predecessor give a great shout out to Dr. Drake, who really invested in financial aid and financial aid for all individuals who can't afford it. And so my dream is a very simple one. Well, I have many dreams. This particular one as well is, in addition to being an anti-racist institution, and I mean, building on that, is that any student who has the desire could come to The Ohio State University and get a college education and graduate debt-free. So that is a dream, but I could not have gone to college without financial aid and without a scholarship. So I owe it to the next generation to make that happen.
I want to mention just a couple of things real quick. I'm really proud of the fact that at College of Social Work, almost 40% of our undergraduates are first generation students. We're ecstatic about that. And we do a lot of that with James' support. I'd want to, we'd be remiss if we didn't call out our regional campuses and the important role that they play in supporting. And the original question was about low-income people who are not of color. We had Reverend William Barber here last week, 2 weeks ago. Here, this virtual here. I don't know where he was to speak to us about the Poor People's Campaign and the importance of all people of low incomes coming together and working together because they share many problems. They're not a threat to each other. People of color and people who are not of color, who are low income, suffer many of the same experiences. And his effort, his Poor People's Campaign, was very inspiring to me to hear about that. So I was glad we did bring him in.
Thank you. I think we're running close to our end time, so I just want to open it up to the panelists to see if there are any closing remarks or anything that they didn't get an opportunity to share that they'd like to at this point.
Thank you for hosting this. And again, thank you, Drs. Moore and Dean Gregoire, for the leadership you've shown with our task force and in everything that you do. And I'm so excited to be here and be your colleague. And again, it's a fabulous institution. I'm looking forward to serving.
Thank you.
I would just say that it's our moment as Buckeyes, nearly 600 alums. There's no institution probably parallel with ours. We're only limited by imagination. I believe we're capable of doing even more. Just like we love to win national championships in one area of our institution, I think this is one of the grand challenges. How do we solve some of the social, racial challenges? And I think Ohio State is poised to play a critical role, not only in Columbus, Ohio, but the whole entire country.
Just say quickly, it's a privilege, as I said earlier, to work for this president, this provost, and to work with James Moore. I really feel honored and actually pretty humbled at doing all of that. And just coming back quickly to that thing around fear, just meet people where they are, meet people with compassion. Before you can open a mind, you probably have to open a heart. And so let's share let's share from the heart with each other about the experience of others. And if we care about each other, we'll figure the rest of it out. Thank you.
Thank you. And a special thank you to our panelists tonight. We know there is much work to be done, but I know that we are making wonderful progress because of leaders like you. And to all of those watching tonight, thank you for joining us for this first conversation. You have certainly shown the best of Buckeye spirit through your commitment to being leaders for social change and racial justice. We hope to see you for the rest of the series. And to find details and view the recording of today's webinar, you can go to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion's website, www.odi.osu.edu. Again, we truly appreciate your participation and your determination to work alongside our faculty, our staff, our students, and our alumni towards equity and justice. Keep up the great work, Buckeyes. Thank you all.